Eric does a good job in introducing the physics of science.
One thing that you're seeing is a very unusual circumstance where somebody is trying to figure out how to give their first lecture in a physics department, and it concerns the possibility of a theory which attempts to solve the problem of how does a fire light itself. Another thing that you'll see is that it's relatively difficult to read my handwriting. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I've been very vocal about having learning differences, dysgraphia, dyslexia, all sorts of different issues. Symbols come extremely difficult to me. I don't want to spend this time making excuses. What I do want to say is the following. I will be attempting to record a short PowerPoint presentation for after the lecture to say at least some of the constructions are more clearly. This is not meant to be the actual presentation of the theory. What this is an introduction, a down payment, and above all, a historical account of what happened 7 years ago at the University of Oxford when I tried to present these ideas. I've talked before about the twin nuclei problem and our need to get off of this planet. And if we have a hope of getting off of this planet, it really comes from fundamental physics. You see, 100 years ago, or perhaps 105, when Albert Einstein gave us general relativity, he effectively consigned us for life to the solar system. Why is that? Well, his model, his geometric model of space and time, effectively creates a speed limit known as c, or the speed of light. Now, there are 3 rocks that are at least interesting for habitation by humans, although 2 of them are marginal, the Moon and Mars. One of them, of course, is unbelievable, the Earth. But I doubt that we're going to be able to steward the Earth through our new godlike powers, which I've called the twin nuclei problem of cell and atom. We've unlocked the power of both, and I don't think we have the wisdom to stay all in one place. So the question that I had was, if there is any ability to escape to the cosmos that we can see in the night sky, where would it come from?
He raises an interesting point here, cell and atom. So I'm a fan of thorium power. But what we're getting with this virus thing is the understanding of cell. And he made a lovely, eloquent speech, if you like, before this on how wonderful physicists were with regards to the rigour that they have. And the same is with chemistry, biology, stats and the sciences. So, let's listen to him more.
We are almost positive that Albert Einstein's theory of relativity is in some weird way incomplete. The Schwarzschild singularities, which give us black holes, and the initial singularities of the Robertson-Walker-Friedman universe, which are associated with the Big Bang, are some clue that there is some subtle flaw in Einstein's theory. So how to go beyond Einstein? I mean, what Einstein did to Newton was to recover Newton as a special case of a more general theory that is more flexible. And in fact, this is the same problem that we have. Because Albert Einstein's theory is so fundamental, we effectively begin every theoretical physics seminar with a statement about space-time. In other words, Albert Einstein is locked in at the ground floor. So if we can't get below the ground floor to the foundations, it's very difficult to make progress. This is one of the things that is making it almost impossible for us to go beyond the initial revolutions of the 20th century. Do I know that this new theory, if it works, will allow us to escape? I do not. There's no one who can say that, and I don't think I have the skills to develop the physical consequences of the theory, even if the theory turns out to be mostly right. What I will say is that I think that the theory is the first of its kind that I've seen. I believe that in part what you will see is that at a minimum it is like fool's gold. It appears to explain why we think we see three generations, but it also says that perhaps they aren't really 3 generations of matter. Perhaps there are only 2, even though physicists tell us that there are at least 3 or perhaps more. I believe that physics tells us that the universe is chiral, that is, left-right asymmetric, but the theory is itself not chiral. Instead, it chooses to present a different idea, which is that perhaps chirality is emergent, much the way our hands are individually left-right asymmetric, as our pinky is not a reflection of our thumb, but the thumb on each hand is a pairing to the other one, as is the pinky. Now, what does that mean? It means that if perhaps there is matter and there is force that is decoupled from our ordinary world, that matter might restore the parity or the chirality, rather would break the chirality and restore parity between these two halves, the matter we see and the matter that is missing. There are a good number of other things that happen in the theory. It replaces space-time with what I've termed an observerse. Now, an observerse is an unusual gadget in that it's thought of as two separate places where physics takes place, connected by map. That means effectively that we are in something like a stadium where there are stands and there is a pitch. And the playing field that we think we see may not in fact be where most of the action is taking place. In fact, not all of the fields live on the same space. So when we see waves and particles dancing around, they may have separate origins in each of the two components of the observerse. What I hope to do after this is to gracefully and gradually develop the theory under my leadership. Now, why do I say that? There is a belief in physics and in most fields that the field should behave in a communal fashion, and that people should put forward their ideas and other people should joyously build upon them, and that the community should be allowed to name the various accomplishments for whoever they say accomplished those things. There's not a way in hell that I'm letting that happen. My experience with this community is that it simply can't be trusted to behave equitably, given the fact that it is so resource-starved and constrained. People simply do not have the freedom to be generous, kind, and accurate as to who did what. Furthermore, there is an incredible premium on cherry topping. That is, who finished something off is considered bizarrely much more important than who found something to begin with. Imagine you located an island and you name the island after the first person who could plant the flag on the top of the highest peak. This is patently offensive and ridiculous. There's a story years ago about how Hilbert almost scooped Einstein by giving the Hilbert action from which Einstein's equations could be recovered. Really? Not a chance. So if Hilbert came up with the Hilbert action and recovered Einstein's equations, so what? I mean, the real theory actually takes place in Einstein and Grossman before Albert Einstein even works out a lot of the flaws in the original theory. It's about the ideas, it's not about the formulas, and it's not about racing to the final form. Now, I know that the community won't agree with that, but think about this. What I'm doing is taking an incredible risk. I'm addressing you here on April Fool's Day, and I'm saying that if there is a fool, it is certainly me, because I have sat on this theory for almost 40 years. Now, I've never known, is it true, is it false? It's impossible to tell when you're only talking to yourself. But in this situation, what I've done is I've taken a tremendous amount of risk.
What's actually going to happen with this is he's asked to be a supervisor, if you like, the professor, and he would, if I engaged with him, he would listen, and what would come from it is a community. He's talked to Joe Rogan, and from that community would become if you like, what Vanderbilt University is, and this video perhaps may become part of Vanderbilt University's archive, and who knows, he may become an alumni of Vanderbilt University. However, at this stage, he's...
And now I'm trying to share it with you. Hopefully, I know that, Newton did his greatest work when he was sheltering from a great plague in England. And I would like to think that perhaps, whether or not this is correct, simply the act of somebody trying earnestly to share hope and some path forward would be uplifting. Now, under the worst circumstances, if this doesn't work, what do I think? This is a question I'm asked frequently. And there are two things that I'll say. Many years ago, around 1987, I put forward some equations that I thought might become my thesis at the Harvard Department of Mathematics, and they were disallowed for a variety of reasons. Those equations were later discovered in, I believe, 1994, and I sat in a lecture in which I saw these equations go up on a board at the very end at MIT. And I looked at those equations and I said, those are the exact equations I was told could never work. Why is the leading physicist in the world placing them on the board and saying that these are the equations from which all of something called Donaldson theory can be derived? What I'm giving you, at least at a minimum, had the ability years earlier to provide those equations from a different source. There's something called Seiberg-Witten theory, which I have no claim on. But the actual equations that are called the Seiberg-Witten equations came originally as an outgrowth from investigations of this theory. So at a bare minimum, the Seiberg-Witten revolution should have happened at Harvard rather than Princeton. And it should have been recognized that this theory was capable of, at least at a minimum, giving birth to that as a side project. The other thing that I think is incredibly important is that we've never seen how a universe that looks like ours could possibly emerge from almost no assumptions whatsoever. And I believe that even if this theory were to turn out to be wrong, which I don't think is likely, I believe that it would give us something to go on. We would at least have a first candidate of how a hopeful theory of everything would look and how it would go wrong.
Just to interrupt, so for the last 2 decades, my existence, if you like, outside the academic circles has been with some people who are at 1 in a million and above IQ levels. So they quip about preconception or non-existence, the many worlds theories. Richard May is one of them, and Adam Kisby is another. And there are a whole host of individuals at that level, maybe about 3,000 in an English-speaking context. So when this gentleman talks about the theory of everything, that's something that has been discussed. So it's interesting. The guy Witten is a very fascinating figure in string theory. So people are locked down. We can sit in front of a camera like this and academia can thrive. No bricks and mortar, but binary. And so anyway, I'm interested in engaging with this gentleman.
So